I was close to throwing in the towel.
Sorry. Sorry. Give me 1 second. I'm just pushing it off Facebook.
Hit record thing, and then we'll
It's recorded.
Okay,
Look at
perfect. Okay, welcome everyone to the continuation of our webinar series. We have here Mr. Chris Potter, who is the founder of 5-Star Solar Society and the free wholesale system course. So welcome, Chris.
Hey, how's it going? It's had some technical difficulties, and we're about 10 minutes late, but hopefully we can cram in as much as possible within 50 minutes.
Yes, let's get started then.
Cool.
So tell me about your Amazon story. How did Mr. Chris Potter get started?
I mean, do you want the 40-minute version or do you want the 2-minute version?
Let's shoot for like a 3-minute version.
All right, so we'll shoot for a 3-minute version. So, really quick story. I actually started selling on eBay back in 2005, selling ASCII TV products out of my basement. It got to a point to where we actually started selling Halloween costumes.
Sorry, eBay started in like 2004, right?
No, it was earlier than that. It was like 1990 something.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It started a while ago. So 2005, I started that. Did it part time on my house. I started selling Halloween costumes in 2008, and we actually started selling on Amazon FBA in 2009. That was our first foray into that. I actually started full time in late 2008, and so I've been actually selling online for about almost 10 years now. With various different businesses. So I do have that. The original business I did, Halloween costumes, no longer exists. We had some various issues, but at one point we were on the Inc. 5000 list. I had 25,000 square foot warehouse, 22 employees at one point. So it was quite massive. And then we had some issues that happened because of Amazon and various stories with that. So I did a reboot in 2014. And so that's kind of what I'm working on now. I did start the 5-Star Seller Society, which is a community for sellers over $100,000 a year. And we started that in 2015. I also started coaching other Amazon sellers about a year ago or so now. So that's my really quick, very short story that I could have went into a lot more detail of.
Okay, let's go into more detail. So when you started your Halloween costume business, what was your vision for that business?
To sell stuff.
So did you find the Halloween costumes first, or did you find eBay first and then you found something to sell?
So when I actually started in 2005, I basically just tried to find whatever I could resell. I mean, just like everyone started now, like if you're trying to find wholesale or doing other things now, it's very simple to find suppliers now. You can just go to a trade show website, or there's a ton of other places you can find wholesale suppliers now. Google can do a great job too. Back then, it was nearly impossible to find much of anything that was legit. If you did a Google search for anything, it would have a bunch of scam sites, or it would have middlemen. It would have a bunch of crap. So I actually ended up started finding like one company who was it was a low-level distributor of a product. They're basically just re-wholesaling stuff out. And so I ended up finding them somewhere, started buying product from them, which they were effectively drop shipping from the actual wholesaler. And so once I figured that out, I ended up going to the wholesaler. Then the wholesaler, I ended up finding out was buying from someplace else, and it was like 4 or 5 levels deep before I actually figured who the actual person was to contact. And that's basically how it started. And then the Halloween costume stuff actually didn't start until 3 years after I started. And that mainly had to do with I had been selling a bunch of different various types of items. I actually had a Funko account, which a lot of people talk about Funko these days. They're Amazon has decimated them and so forth. I actually had a Funko account back in 2006. So I was actually selling that. I was actually selling bobbleheads before it even came out with pop figures. I actually ended up selling a ton of Obama bobbleheads the year that he won presidency. I did a bunch of pay-per-click advertising on Google and drove into my site and I had a ton of sales of that, and we sold a bunch of other bobbleheads too. But
Oh my God.
anyways,
I can't believe you have a Funko account. That's
I
insane.
yeah, I had one back in 2006 before Amazon even had one.
um, so does that mean you started in wholesale day one? You're selling existing brands that
Yep.
already had Amazon listings, or did you end up creating a lot of these listings and bringing them to market?
No, my strategy was the same that a lot of arbitrageurs have or have used in the past, which is just looking to see for existing listings, look at the sales ranks, and go from there. Of course, back then there weren't all these amazing tools you have now, like Keepa
Yeah.
and some of these other ones that give you history. It was you look at the sales rank and you're like, okay, cool. This is a sales rank of 120,000. That looks like it's going to sell great. But as you know, sales rank is not necessarily uh, a, a really good indicator if you're just looking at a one snapshot. Um, in some cases, we end up eating some product because of that philosophy. But yeah, I mean, that's what we were doing.
We all learn.
Yep.
um, what was your mindset like when you first started, and has that changed today?
My original mindset just had to do with I wanted to have my own business, and I always kind of had like an entrepreneurial itch even when I was younger. I was like writing newspapers out and trying to sell it to neighbors when I was younger. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff I had. And before I actually started selling this, I actually had started a mail order business. This is before before the internet. I'm really dating myself now, but yeah, I actually had started a mail order business at one point, and that didn't go very well. But yeah, as far as the mindset, it was mainly just trying to grow business. And as I started growing, I actually worked at Best Buy for a long time, and so I was actually in management and other things, and I really studied like their business model and how they built their systems and processes and things like that. And so a lot of the things that I saw that worked with them, because I was through kind of the really big growth phase. I actually started there in 1996, and I ended up actually
Wow.
leaving in 2008 when I went full time. So I was there for 12 years. So I got to see them from when they were a shit show of a company. Sorry for my French. But they were a shit show of a company back in 1996 where they just allowed everyone to have overtime. They didn't have systems processes. And then they came out with SOPs, and they basically rolled out all of this stuff while I was there. And I watched them roll this stuff out, and I watched how they did all this stuff. And of course, in my back of my mind, I'm taking these notes of this is how they're doing all this stuff. So a lot of the thought process when I was starting to grow my business was, all right, how do I systematize things to where it could be a potentially big company? So that was kind of my mindset after a few years of me starting. Initially, it was just I'll just sell some stuff, make some money part time. Hey, this could actually be a real thing to do, which is kind of the mindset a lot of people do when they start their own thing. Then you're like, holy crap, this actually makes some money. But then it got to the point to where I was like, you know what, this could actually become a pretty big business. And that's when I started, hiring more people. That's when I started trying to put systems and processes in place. And today, I would say my mindset's pretty similar. My goal is to put systems and processes in place, put people in place to do their jobs. Some of it's changed because back then my mindset was to hire people locally, whereas now it's almost all virtual now. So that has shifted a little bit, but the overall mindset of building the correct culture, building the correct systems and processes in place is relatively the same.
Did you look for a partner when you first started?
Nope.
You just did it yourself and told yourself, hey, I'm going to build this empire of 22 employees.
that was basically it. I mean, I actually didn't partner up with anyone. And this is actually a lesson learned from my past is, yes, I did do that. And it's also partially the reason why my first business isn't operating today. One of the things that I was kind of stubborn about is I really didn't seek out knowledge from other people. I just kind of, tested crap and figured stuff out on my own, and thought I was a pretty smart guy. I could do whatever I needed to do and figure it out. I never went out and seeked out other people. I never really went out to. I mean, at the time, obviously, there weren't Facebook groups or YouTube videos or anything crazy like that. But at the time, I didn't attempt to talk to anyone. My guess is if I actually had someone to bounce ideas off of or other things back then, I probably wouldn't have ran into a lot of the failures I did. Whereas now, I actually have partnered up quite a few people on various things now. So that's definitely been a big shift regarding partnership. Is even if you don't partner up with anyone, as long as you have a good network of people around you that you can bounce ideas off of, talk to, gain knowledge off of, and swap stories and that type of stuff, which is the main reason why I'm really looking forward to the conference next week, because realistically there isn't a better way to really get that get in the mindset of what you're doing as far as going to conferences, because you never know who you're going to meet there, and you never know who might be your next partner. I mean, it's possible.
Can't agree more.
It's possible you show up at this conference next week or any conference that's coming up, and the person that you're going to be partners with next year might be at that conference. You don't know.
You don't really know. The guy sitting next to you or the guy you have lunch with.
Exactly. You just don't know. And the reality is that you won't know if you don't go to those type of things. So sorry for my total plug of your conference there. That really was not planned whatsoever. He did not. I can promise you beforehand. He was like, "Hey, you got to pitch my conference, man." I swear to you, he did not whatsoever. That just kind of came organically. So,
well, thank you for that. But how do you when you have something on your hands? Do you have a system or a process in place where this piece is gonna go into a potential partnership bucket of like, hey, like let's run this through partners, let's see who's interested, and how do you determine which business opportunities and pieces you want to just do yourself and have your own team do it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I honestly believe that the best partnerships come from people who A, get along well together, and B, complement each other's skills. Those tend to be the best partnerships of all. So usually I'm looking for those two things. And also having the right mindset and right philosophy of how you want to work together is kind of a big deal too.
What I meant was when you have an opportunity come across your table, mm-hmm. Do you have any systems in place to determine whether or not you want to seek out a partner on this opportunity? And do it with the partner. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I go into anything right now saying I need a partner for anything, because I really haven't started any projects recently. So I don't really necessarily have that systematized to say, hey, I've got this coming up, maybe I need to partner with someone. So no, I don't. To answer your question, okay. No, I don't really have a system in place for that. I have systems for a lot of other stuff, but definitely not that. I haven't done enough partnership deals to where I need to have a system in place. Not to mention a lot of it's like every situation where I have a partnership deal has all been different scenarios. One of them was 5-star that I partnered up on that. There's been some product deals that have partnered on with people. I partnered up with someone on my old drop shipping business. On that, I was a technology partner. So there was that. Upcoming, I'm partnering up with someone on a prep center, which is something you probably didn't know. So that's also another thing that I'm working on. So these are all various randomly different things. So I think it'll be kind of hard to really put a process in place to easily be able to vet these things and figure out what to do. It's just a matter of having that right connection and talking with them and seeing what makes sense, which I think is kind of the same thing you've probably ran into with Dang too.
Yeah, for sure. It was more of a gut feeling more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would agree when you're talking about partnerships. I think that's the key. If you click well enough, and you can kind of bounce ideas off each other, and your skill sets kind of they're not necessarily 100% aligned. That's probably any partnership I've gotten into that hasn't necessarily done well. It's because both of our skill sets significantly overlapped. So definitely, as long as you have separate skill sets and you can kind of attack it, and there's understanding on what each of you are responsible for, they're great.
Cool. What are some of the things you systemize? So,
go ahead, finish your question.
So I don't know, because it seems like you have a system and a process in place for everything, but what is everything?
Okay. I can tell you some of the things I have processes for, and I can kind of work through the pattern of how a user who's listening to me that has all these systems in place and how you would actually start tackling this.
Sure.
So various systems I have in place is one, I have an actual hiring process. So there's actually a hiring process in place. There's a testing process for new hires that come in. There is a new hire checklist that we have. We have, once a new hire is in place, there's actually training materials already in place for them to actually do their job. So there's a process in place for that. Now, so there's a training process for that. And then pretty much anything you can think of that is related to the business, whether that is how to run a price list through Price Checker, or how to put an item in, how to put something into a CRM. Which, if you're unfamiliar with what CRM is, it's a system to basically track your contacts and leads and so forth. Basically anything you can kind of think of that you do on a regular basis can be systematized. So the way that I'd recommend for someone who doesn't have anything systematized and they're just like, well, how the hell do I grasp this? What do I do? The first thing I usually recommend is to start writing down every single thing that you do on a regular basis, and literally just jot down every single process or task that you do, and start doing that for at least a week. And so take a look at the ones that you've written down, and look at the ones that you're probably doing the most. So which task are you absolutely doing the most? And the one that you're likely doing the most is probably the one that you probably have down pat the most, and it's one you probably have a pretty good system in your head, and you're just following a standard process yourself. Then it's just a matter of taking that process and putting it down somewhere that it can be recorded. So whether that's a video that you create, whether that's just a Google Doc, you actually start writing out steps of what you're doing. That's usually the first thing I recommend doing, is just start recording what you're doing, start writing steps of what you do. And that's a good way to start. And start on the tasks that you tend to do the most, and then kind of as time goes on, then you just kind of reiterate on that. So once you've made a change to something, then you need to change your processes too. And then this becomes this huge book of stuff that you do, as you go along. I can go back in time and I can look at processes I've put in place 5-6 years ago, because there's so many processes that I've done in the past, and some are totally obsolete. It's almost pretty amusing that I look back at some of these things and I look at it and I'm like, what the hell was I doing? But that's because you reiterate over and over again, and your process is just kind of molded into place. And it gets to a point to where it's very, very easy to be able to have someone step into some of these different processes, and picking them apart. Definitely picking them apart and actually saying, okay, if we need to run a thing through Price Checker 2, which is a piece of software you can run price lists through, I like to literally write down every single step that I would want them to do, which is probably pretty anal, but my VAs and anyone that has looked through my training materials, they heavily appreciate it. Is what you'll notice, especially for people in the Philippines, they're extremely good at following directions, but they're not exactly the greatest at thinking of things on their own, or putting complex tasks together. So if you leave things very ambiguous, that makes them have to think about what they're doing. And in a lot of cases, you want to try and take that thought process out of there, unless you have a higher level person that you think can do that. And if that higher level person is there, then by all means have them reiterate and have them write down what they would do better. But the key thing is to really think of everything, literally think of everything that could be done. And if there's an outlier scenario, jot it down. I mean, something happens to pop up and you're like, you know what, that hasn't happened in like 2 weeks. Perfect. Put it down in your documents, so that way the next time it does come up, you're like, well, what the hell did I do last time that this happened? Well, let me look at my document material, and hey, there it is. Instead of me having to think 30 minutes about how to solve this problem again, I looked at my materials and it's already there. So it does save time too.
I ever since I started putting down processes, it's helped a lot, because especially for the things that you don't often do but are time consuming. So stuff that you do like once a month or once a quarter, when you go back and you go like, hey, I need to do this, and you're like, oh, I forgot how to do it, so let me Google this, research this, and then 2 hours later,
Those are the best. Those are the best ones. Like for example, just like updating QuickBooks.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm pretty well, versed in doing this, because I've been doing it for God knows so many years. But I was very bad at it when I was younger. I was extremely bad at it, and I distinctly remember that I would just ignore QuickBooks, and I'd be like, oh, I should probably do this. And then I would get in there, and I'd be like, I don't remember what the hell to do. And I'd be like, oh, future Chris will deal with this. And future Chris definitely dealt with that when he had to put together a year's worth of transactions in April. So now I have processes in place to deal with this stuff.
Yeah. And then you sit there for a week going, what was I thinking?
Yeah, and then you just totally wasted all this time, and you're thinking to yourself, why did I spend this $320 in January of last year, and it's March right now? It's like, how am I going to remember this a year and a half later? That looks like office expense, I guess.
Okay. So you mentioned testing multiple times. What are some interesting things that you've tested in the past? What are some of the methods you use to test them? And what are you testing now?
Let's see. I've definitely, let's say a most recent test is probably PPC testing, pay-per-click testing.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah.
What do you mean by?
So an example of that would be is, I went through like a training course just to kind of get an idea of the basics, because that was something that I literally I had an idea of how to do it, but I really didn't fully understand it. And when I fully don't understand anything, there's just not a ton of free information out there, which there literally isn't for pay-per-click. There really wasn't a lot out there. So I actually bought a course, which I do this very rarely. I buy courses. So I bought that one, went through the course. And then it was a matter of going through the process of that. But then, my thought process is usually, okay, well, this is what's being taught. What isn't being taught? Because the reason why I say that is because most of the time, the people who are doing training courses, me included, I have a free training course, and me included, there's things that I'm doing today that aren't in that course. And it's because people who create courses typically are already a step ahead of whatever that course is they put out. So my immediate thought is, okay, well, what are some things I can test to try and figure out what they're doing? Because you have to think that a lot of things they did to create this course is they tested stuff. An example would be in pay-per-click is the recommended method is to have 3 separate ad groups and 3 separate campaigns per ASIN, one for broad, one for exact match, and one for phrase. And it's recommended to have all 3 of those. And so my thinking is, okay, well, how the hell did they figure this out? Well, obviously they must have thrown them all together first, and then when that didn't kind of work, they're like, okay, well, let's kind of move this out, kind of move this out, and kind of move this here. And that's kind of what I started doing with some of my testing on pay-per-click was, all right, let's put them into 3 different groups. If I run this in broad match, is there a way that I can pop this into a different campaign and see how that works? Maybe there's some sort of algorithm in the background that has to do with like something with what your campaign looks like. So if you pull out like a winner out of the campaign group and put it into a different group, maybe that makes a difference. And so those are just kind of some random things that, just kind of just thinking of things that you weren't taught to do and you didn't learn off of a YouTube video or a Facebook group or something like that, and just kind of putting those into place. That's an example of one. And that's a semi-recent one. When I was doing drop shipping in the past, that was a test on its own. That was a total test on its own because there was one day my friend had told me, hey, you should get this inflatable kayak, and I'm like, okay. So I go on Amazon. It's like $250 or something. I'm like, that seems a little expensive. I go on Walmart. It's like $120. I'm like, there's a variance here. And I'm like, okay, well, let's test this. So they, threw an I'm up for sale, and then it worked. And I'm like, holy crap, this might work. And then, of course, Amazon changed their guidelines, didn't allow that anymore per their terms and conditions. But, that was actually a test that I had ran just because something kind of sparked my interest. And I'm like, well, holy hell, let's test this out. So those are some random things, but just figuring out whatever kind of spark comes out, and try to do something that you aren't necessarily taught. And I usually recommend taking a small budget of something and putting it aside and saying, okay, this is my testing budget. Find something to play around with, play something to test. Let's say, for example, you're doing arbitrage right now, and you're used to listing on listings all the time. That's what you do. Well, something you probably haven't done yet is create your own listing on something. So take a budget of, if your full sourcing budget is, let's say, $5,000 a month, don't spend, $1,000 of it on testing. Maybe take $100 out. $100 or something, and just say, all right, well, I'm going to go buy an item that doesn't have a listing on Amazon. I'm just going to throw it up and see what the hell happens, and you learn from it. And once you throw it up there, that's a test. If it sells, awesome. If it doesn't, then try and figure out, okay, well, why didn't it sell? And then start looking into it and say, okay, well, what makes things sell on Amazon? Is it the keywords? Is it the bullet point? Is it the image? Is it because I have no reviews? Is it because I did no keyword research whatsoever? And this is kind of where you start going into some of those rabbit trails, and just keep digging and digging. And I mean, that's really what I like to recommend doing. Just have a little bit of a testing budget, try some stuff out. And sometimes this stuff works, and sometimes you fall flat on your face, and you're like, "Well, there goes $100 I'll never get back." But and sometimes that $100 turns into $5,000.
Yeah,
you just don't know, And sometimes you stumble upon something that you're like, "Wow, this really, really works." And then once you find something that really, really works, then it's just a matter of duplicating that over and over and over again until it gets saturated. And then when it gets saturated, you find something else.
I love it, because that $100 is gonna teach you so many things that you never thought that you would learn. And then sometime in the future, maybe like 5 years from now, even, you might be able to apply that in some way and then make tons of money from it, and you never know.
Yeah, I mean, that whole drop shipping experience got me into the world of partnership, because that was actually the first partner I actually really had, was actually the guy, was a technology guy that had built out the technology platform, and I partnered up with him. And I'd never done a partnership before, and that was the first time I ever did it. And I learned stuff from that partnership, which then helped me into these other partnerships I've done going forward. So, if I hadn't gotten that spark that one day from a friend that said, "Hey, go find an inflatable kayak," and I started being curious about it, I threw a couple items up, realized how tedious stuff was, and I looked for a technology partner. I had a partner. Years later, we ended up splitting off because of various reasons. One of them being the terms of service change. Another one, just wasn't profitable for both of us to continue working together. But I took things with that, and I said, okay, well, what worked with that? What can I now go into other things? And there's things I learned in that aspect, especially data-wise, because when you're dealing with that, there's a ton of data, and it allowed me to also figure out ways to look at data as a whole a lot easier and understand what I'm looking at. So, yeah, just test some stuff out. You'll learn some stuff.
Okay, let's shift gears to wholesale.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Chris Potter runs one of the biggest wholesale businesses that we know of, at least. So, what is your primary way of sourcing wholesale? Do you just pick up the phone and cold call? Do you go to trade shows? Anything else you do?
I'll give you my honest answer to that right now is nothing. Well, and let me preface this. Is the reason why is because I'm mainly just maintaining existing accounts, because I'm going into a transition period of doing more private label. So I've made a conscious decision of not necessarily looking for more accounts, or just maintaining what we have. But I can tell you that what was working extremely well most recently, when we were actively looking for new accounts, it's mainly a combination of a few things. One of them is going to trade shows and talking with people. Two is doing reverse wholesale sourcing, kind of just like the Wholesale Formula teaches in their free 5-day seminar, whatever they do to try and get you to buy a $2,000 course. That's a way to find leads. All you're really looking to do is your goal in wholesale is, first of all, to find leads. And then once you find the lead, it's a matter of contacting those leads and trying to close the leads and figure out the best solutions for those leads. So what we would do is basically fan out in as many ways as possible to find as many leads as possible. So reverse sourcing was one way. Going to trade shows was another way. Literally going to chambers of commerce locally was one way. Looking at like Etsy and Pinterest and some of these other places, looking for random brands is another way. Running storefront stalkers on other sellers is another way. I mean, there's so many various ways you can find leads. we were using them all. We were testing every one of them out that we possibly could. And the ones that really work the best are just when you get on the phone with these people. Because a matter of where you find a lead doesn't make a whole lot of difference, other than possibly whether, maybe the value of the lead. That might be about the only difference, because if you're at a trade show and you're just on a trade show website and you're just pulling all the stuff down and looking at them, you have no idea whether half these people are on Amazon or not. Whereas if you're reverse sourcing off of Amazon, these people are already on Amazon. So there's varying different lead points. But once you have the lead, it's a matter of contacting these people and figuring out what the best solution is to help out their business. Because your goal as a wholesale person for Amazon is to figure out whatever those solutions are to help improve that brand owner's sales. That should be your number one priority. That is your priority. Your priority should not be, let me try and get a slice of the sales that are already there. That worked 5 years ago. That worked 5 years ago. But you have to understand that as time has went on, a lot of companies realize that there's so many Amazon accounts out there, and there's so many people frothing at the bit to get these accounts, that there's heavy competition that just wasn't there multiple years ago. So you have to think of ways that you can angle yourself to do this. So one of the questions here I just happened to pop in here says, don't you see your profits start to shrink if you maintain your accounts? It's a matter of what type of accounts you have. When you get these leads and you start talking to them and you figure out the right solutions, in some cases the solution is to just resell their product. Which in those cases, if you're doing that with 10 other sellers, then yes, your profits will probably start to erode. But now if you get in contact with, let's say, a company who isn't signed on Amazon yet, and you're the one who actually brings their product to market, so that they literally have no presence on Amazon whatsoever, and you create their listings for them, you effectively create demand for them, which means you're the only seller. And now effectively that brand owner is somewhat in debt to you because you've essentially created this demand for them. The reality is that they're pretty good usually at not wanting to let other sellers ruin that, because you can kind of position yourself and say, look, if you can warn them ahead of time and say, what will happen is when these other sellers come in, it's going to cause me to have to lower my price, which is going to erode margins, which means I'm going to have less time to spend on your account to improve your sales. Because if it's not profitable for me, then it makes no sense for me to do any more work on your account. Now, if that happens, then all the stuff that I've done for the last 6 months goes kaput. And usually when you have that sort of conversation, most of the time, if they're a smart business person, they'll understand that what you're saying makes sense. And they will lock other brands out. And they just won't allow other people to sell their stuff. Another one would be if you're doing brand consulting, which is something I really like doing, is brand consulting, where we don't actually even resell their stuff. We only resell their stuff. They have their own Amazon account, and they're already selling their stuff. And so what you're doing is you're basically just consulting them to improve their sales. So I have a couple brands that are like that, and those are great. Those are absolutely great as long as you have the right partners. We've talked about partners before, and a lot of times when you're doing this stuff, you literally are partnering with companies. And as long as you have the right partners, it can work out extremely well. So like those cases, we have an agreement where I'm the one that controls their account. I help out with Matt, Matt monitoring and other things, and we get paid for our service. And so you don't have to worry about margins at all in those cases. So there are ways to effectively set things up to where you are somewhat impervious to these margin and profit problems, which that's the best way you probably should attack wholesale.
Okay.
I saw another question on here. You want me to answer this one real quick?
Sure.
It said, in that case, wouldn't you rather spend the effort on your own PL products as opposed to bringing your products to Amazon? What advantage do you see? Great question. That's a great question. That actually stems partially the reason why I started shifting my business towards more trying to go towards private label. Now, I'm not going to tell you that wholesale isn't a good idea, because in some cases, there are some advantages of going wholesale versus going private label. Going private label, you have to deal with a lot of other logistical concerns that you just don't have to deal with when you're dealing with wholesale. One of them is importing products. There's also lead times. There's also capital concerns, because with private label products, a lot of times you have to send a wire overseas, and you typically have to send that up front. In some cases, maybe 50%, 30%, whatever it is. But usually you have to pay that stuff up front. And you might not even get your product for 2 months, month and a half. So now you're out that cash for a month and a half while you're waiting for your product to come in. Whereas with wholesale, I mean, you could place an order on a credit card. You get your 30-day, grace period on your credit card, and you might already have your stuff sold by the time it's even due on your credit card. So that's one major advantage you have selling wholesale versus private label.
Especially if you have terms as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely. In some cases, you can get the really big glory, which is getting terms and allowing to pay your terms with a credit card. So some suppliers will literally give you 30, 60, 90 days net, and then you get to pay with your credit card. So in some cases, you might not have to pay for anything for 3 to 4 months, and you've already sold half that product, if not more. Whereas you can't do that whatsoever typically when you're buying private label. Plus, there's liability concerns that have to do with private label. If you're doing things properly, you should have the correct testing and other things done with your product you have to deal with, which when you're buying with a manufacturer that's already done all this stuff. In some cases, they already have social media accounts. They already have some sort of audiences that you can tap into. And when you're building your own brand with private label, you have absolutely nothing. So there's various reasons why wholesale is better than private label in some cases. And so that's why I would think that, depending on what your skill set is and kind of where you are in your business, I wouldn't necessarily say one is better than the other. I think they both hold their own value. And like I said, if you're with the wholesale side, there's also a consulting angle you can go with, which you literally put up no working capital whatsoever, and you're getting monthly income coming in off of that, which for some people that are strapped for cash, that is extremely, extremely lucrative. Because anyone knows that's been selling product for a while, the biggest concern most people have when they're attempting to scale is working capital. That by far is the number one concern you hear from most people once you get to $1 million in sales a year. That almost always is the first thing that comes up, is especially if they're trying to grow. If they have this hockey stick growth like this, if you're having this hockey stick growth, it is which I'm trying to do Canadian terms here for you. If you have this hockey stick growth, cash flow is the biggest concern you have. Obviously, systems, processes, employees, all that crap is in the background. But if you don't have cash flow, that's an issue. And one way to alleviate that cash flow concern is to start consulting for people, where you literally just get paid for your time and effort, and you can outsource a lot of that effort. So it's made at that point, it's just trading dollars, large dollars for small dollars versus putting up a ton of money and possibly getting some of it back and possibly having to sit on some stuff for 6 months. That's also the reason why you see a lot of when a lot of these bigger sellers, which myself included, start doing consulting gigs or start doing coaching or start doing like courses like the wholesale formula. A lot of it stems from cash flow concerns. If they're looking to continue to grow their business, you have to think of ways to come up with money. So the most common things that people think about is, okay, I'm going to go to the bank. I'm going to go get more money. I'm going to go to Amazon and see if they can give me a loan. But those have huge interest rates associated with, especially Amazon loans. Some of them have 12% interest rates. And a lot of times you have to have good credit to do these things. Whereas if you come out with a course that you can sell for X amount of dollars, that can create immediate cash flow that you don't have to do much for. And so that's why you see a lot of people doing this. And I can guarantee you that in a lot of cases, a lot of these people that put out these really large courses, my guess is that a majority of their profitability now is from the courses and not from their e-commerce business, because it's incredibly lucrative. So just being honest here. There's actually a phrase I'd heard from somewhere where they said that when you're building an e-commerce business, there is a point where you're going to start to run out of money, and obviously the things I talked about are ways to get bring cash flow into your business. But they also say there's effectively a few other ways to think about this. Is if you're selling products, then your goal at this point should be to serve your audience. So especially if you're bringing private label products on board, or even wholesale products could work for this too. Your goal is to serve an audience, and so you shouldn't think about just selling products. You should be thinking about serving an audience. So if you're bringing in a garlic press, because everyone loves the garlic press, your goal is likely to serve an audience of kitchen people who use garlic presses. So the thought, obviously, in most cases, are okay. Well, let's see what other products can I sell this garlic press person. Maybe I'm going to buy some some of those mitts. Some of those mitts to do that. Oh, you also need some barbecue gloves and some barbecue. Think of any random one. But anyways, your goal is to kind of think of how you service audience. Well, it gets to a point where you just can't buy any more product for that. So how else can you service audience? Is it building out a Facebook group? Is it building out a community? Is it building out information products? Is it building out software? I mean, is there some sort of software solution that you can create for that? I mean, there's so many other avenues to try and create cash that is not selling products. And when you start thinking about serving audiences versus just selling products, all these random ideas can start coming to you about how you can serve this audience better and how you can actually generate some cash that's not from a bank and not from other places. So there's a lot of ways to grow your business, and I'm in the way of thinking of every possible way of doing that. So there's just kind of some thoughts I had on that. So sorry, it went from your original question. It went off to a ridiculously long tangent about random other stuff, but.
No, it's great. we love seeing what goes on in your head.
Sometimes I'm sure you don't want to know what's going on in my head, but.
So you do have a course. You are one of these people who run.
I don't charge for it though. I don't charge for it.
Just going there. So Chris, for those of you who don't know, Chris definitely has cash flow problems, but he also comes out with a course, but it's absolutely free. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about why did you choose to put out a free course for people?
Some of it stem from I guess there's two reasons. One of them is that there was a hole to fill. There was a market out there that needed to be sought after. And so what I'm referring to is there was a lot of promotions about a course, which everyone probably knows about. It's the Wholesale formula. There was a ton of promotion, and the biggest grumbling that most people saw when that was is when they first came out, they charged $500, which everyone seemed was 100% reasonable. And then as they grew, they may have added some stuff, but then they started increasing the price, which is pretty common across any courses. But I think what really irked a lot of people was when they got to like the $2,000 range, then they started really pushing affiliates really hard, and they were giving $1,000 to affiliates for that. And so that caused a lot of bad will throughout the different communities. And so that I kind of looked at it and said, okay, well, there's probably a market gap here where there's really this information could be put out there for free, and then figure out a way to monetize it later. And that was kind of the philosophy I had initially going into that. Obviously, there were some self-concerns with it too, is that I knew that by doing that, it's going to grow an audience that I can potentially serve, which could turn into coaching clients. It could turn into other things that could cause revenue streams. And so I decided to go down that angle of, trying to funnel more people into 5-Star Seller Society, funneling people into my coaching programs, versus trying to sell a course. That was effectively what I did. That was more or less a lead generation tool than anything. But yeah, a lot of it stemmed from me seeing a market gap and going after it, which is, the same thing I did back in the day when I started selling Halloween costumes. The reason why I started selling them on eBay is because there just weren't a lot of people selling costumes on eBay. I found a gap and I filled it. And same thing when I started retail drop shipping back in the day is, there's a lot of these huge products that are being sold that are not really FBA-able, that could be drop shipped, and so there's a gap there where you can fill it. But
it wasn't just about the gap. I think you are one of those people who really, really care about helping other people and really want to see people move forward with their businesses, right?
No. I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. Yeah, you're right. I participate, especially when I had my old business and it went kaput. And I started getting to a lot of these Facebook groups and so forth. I realized that my knowledge level was extremely high compared to a lot of people that were in the community. And I just really like sharing the information. It's just fun. I love talking shop. I could literally sit here and talk about business stuff all day long, and my wife would probably, she kills me for this. But I literally just enjoy talking about it. It's just fun for me. Like, When I started my eBay business, it was a hobby for me. It was literally a hobby for me. I didn't have any other hobbies. My hobbies were basically watching sports on TV, and I decided to start this eBay business. Those are my hobbies. And today, the hobbies I have are relatively still non-existent. My hobby is my business. I love talking shopping. I love talking stuff. So, when you see me at conferences like the one coming up next week, here's another plug for you. When you see me at conferences next week, I'll have no problem talking about whatever for God knows how many hours on end, because it literally is fun for me. And the thing that I actually really enjoy is when I do talk to someone about something and kind of the light bulb just kind of clicks. And to me, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I love seeing it in even like when I'm working with my VAs and a lot of these people, it's just to see the light bulbs click. Just really, I was like that at Best Buy too. When I was training new hires, like to see the light bulbs click and they get it. And they're like, wow, this is really awesome. And so forth. Like that to me actually does fulfill me and makes me happy. And so, yeah, that definitely was part of it. I'm sorry I glossed over that fact first time, but you're definitely right that I think that it is something I really, really enjoy. Is just I'm just happy when I see other people succeed, which I know is very corny for someone who does coaching. You hear people say this all the time. But yeah, also, I'm really happy for you. But I legitimately am happy when I see people succeed, because it's great, especially when you see stories like, they were working their full-time job and they're able to get out of that and start doing things on their own full-time, and they're able to get out of the rat race. I mean, these stories are great, and it's nice to be able to see those those things click in their head. They're like, awesome.
I'm the exact same way. It makes me more happy that I help someone sell another $100 than for me to make another like 10 grand.
It's true, because like I'll talk to my wife sometimes, and I'll be like, oh, guess what so and so is doing to a couple of my coaching clients. I'll talk to her about them, and she's like, well, how's their business doing? I'm like, I don't know. Let me look. How much revenue we got? I don't know. Let me look real quick. Because it's fun to me. It's just fun talking about those things. I enjoy it. It's just a lot of fun. like earlier today. I mean, I just had to fire a couple of VAs last week for doing some shady stuff, and so I brought a couple of them on board. And one of them today sent me a message that I thought was really interesting. And they're like, wow, your systems and processes and software are just like so like advanced compared to the last person I worked for, and like things are just so much easier. And wow, I just love it. And I'm just like, well, yeah, I mean, isn't that how business is supposed to be? Have processes in place. But sometimes when you have workers who a lot of these freelance workers who have worked for a lot of other people because they're just freelance workers, and they see an actual systems in place and processes in place when they work for like 20 other people that hasn't had them, they're just like, holy crap, what the hell did I just get myself into? And it's pretty nice to see that, definitely.
Okay. Let's talk 5-star. So what is 5-star?
So it's actually a community that was created back in 2015 with Ryan Grant and myself. We originally started it. And a lot of people don't know that he actually started it with me back in 2015.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yep. And so he started it with me. And, when we talk about partnerships, one of the things I realized with Ryan is that a lot of our skill sets overlapped. And so we talked about how like your skill sets shouldn't overlap. Our skill sets like overlap almost to a T in a lot of cases. So it ended up not being. We work well together. Don't get me wrong. We're still talk every so often. We're great. But we both kind of had different visions of what to do with 5-star. He started his coaching group and way earlier than I did, and he just realized he didn't have enough time for it. So he ended up actually leaving 5-star. I think it was the beginning of 2016. It's 2017. Started leaving. It's about a year ago now is when he left. So then I actually took it over from him at the beginning of 2017. I started putting a lot of attention into it. So effectively what it is, it's basically a community for sellers that sell at least $10,000 a month for a 3-month rolling time span, or $100,000 in a year. And so what we do in there is we have a lot of higher level sellers, so we can kind of bounce ideas off each other. And one thing that you see in a lot of groups, which no knock on your group, of course, because your group is great for Canadians. But what you see in a lot of groups is you see a lot of, especially you see this common occurrence where you see new people flowing in and out consistently, and new people have the same questions over and over and over again. And when you're a higher level seller, you don't want to deal with these questions. Again, no offense to your group, because I also have a free group too where I answer the same questions too. But when you're a higher level seller, you want to be around other like-minded people, and you don't want to have to filter out questions that are just gonna, I don't want to say waste your time, but you don't want to spend time on things that aren't necessarily going to improve your business. That's one thing I really like is we put together a lot of people that have similar mindsets and those type of things. And we also do a lot of other things too. Like we have weekly Ask Me Anything sessions where I bring people in from outside of the community and within the community, and you can ask a ton of questions. Like today, we had a guy yesterday, because we do it every Wednesday. We had a guy in there talking about
Cryptocurrency.
Cryptocurrency, yes, cryptocurrency. That was really interesting. I didn't know a whole lot about that, and had some interesting conversations on that. And we have some really cool people. We've had some life coaches. We've had large wholesale sellers. We have large private label sellers. So we do that, and we do a weekly recap where I actually take everything that's good from all different various Facebook groups and in marketing and all these websites. I put into one ridiculously large recap every week, which some people say is overkill, but some people say that they actually pay for the group just to get access to that. So. So those are some of the basics, and of course, I'm in there to answer questions and whatever. But.
So here's a plug for you. I am part of 5 Star Chris Potter Group. It's about 200 people, and as you said, there's a requirement of how much revenue you have to be doing to get in. But the level of sellers in that group and the conversations are just at such a high level that you can't find anywhere else. It's the level of conversation you have one-on-one with people at conferences.
Yep, and then sometimes you get stupid questions too, but usually they're from me asking like, "What's your favorite TV show?" But seriously, yeah, I appreciate the plug there. So if you're interested, if you're definitely interested in that, just go to 5starsellersociety.com. There is a monthly fee for it, but it'll show you right on there.
And Chris puts so much effort into running this group, because I run a group, and it's a lot of effort for me to run a group, but the amount of work that Chris puts in to do weekly AMAs, like there is so much work that goes into that most people don't even think about. And then he, as he was mentioning, he summarizes everything that's happening in the Amazon community once a week in a weekly recap. So if anything, if you're super busy running your business and you don't have time to check out all these Facebook groups, you can just go on the recap and be like, hey, here's 5 things that happened. Like all these changes with Amazon that happened, they'll be in there. And it's a huge time saver, and I would happily pay that monthly fee every month. Just be a part of that.
Yep. Very cool stuff. I appreciate the plug, and of course, if you want to learn more about wholesale, go to freewholesale.com, and there's actually a free course on there for you too. And any other questions for me? Because I know we're actually getting a time, but if you want to run over a few, if you're allowed to, you're more than welcome to. I got a few more minutes. So
sorry, I didn't look at the time at all.
I know we probably haven't even ran through your 20 questions you have because I'm so long-winded on things, but
no, it's all good. That's perfect. we want to go deep. Okay, here's the last one. What's your advice for people who want to get into wholesale but have all these fears of things that might happen if they, I might run into this problem, or I might run into this problem, or capital issues, timing issues, or I'm scared to pick up the phone. I'm scared to go to wholesale shows. Do you have any advice for those people?
The advice for I'm assuming what you're really asking here is, because most people are usually probably are doing arbitrage right now. They're trying to figure out how to get into wholesale, and I would say that the best thing to think about when you're talking about that transition is first just start doing something. Start doing something. And when I'm talking about doing something, the first thing you need to do is to start either sending emails out or getting on the phone and contacting people. Those are probably about the best two things you can do to get started. The reality is that a lot of people just think it's so difficult and this is very hard and, oh, I don't want to do that. But the reality is that all it takes is a couple of phone calls in some cases, just getting the right person on the phone, and you can land a wholesale account in a week. Sometimes it takes forever. I have some coaching clients that have been able to land wholesale accounts extremely quickly. In some cases, just a long tread. But sometimes people don't contact you back. Sometimes they push you off, and who knows what. But the reality is, I think it's just a matter of just getting started. Just like it was, like for someone who started arbitrage, there was a point where they're just like, you know what, I just need to do this. I just need to do it. I just need to get out there and do it. And so the first piece of advice I'd say is to go to a trade show website. And I'm talking about trade show website. You could go to like ASD is one of them. That's actually a conference that's coming up. Or basically pick a niche. So maybe you want to sell kitchen items and just do a search for kitchen trade shows. And a lot of times you'll see various trade shows, which, by the way, another plug for 5-Star is actually a little known feature in 5-Star of trade show directory. I don't even know if you knew that. It's actually on the community websites there. Hardly anyone uses it. But anyways, so do a Google search for whatever your niche is, and then put at the end trade show. So like kitchen trade show or something like that. And then once you go to the trade show website, typically there is a list of attendees or vendors that will be at the trade show. And literally it'll pull up an entire list of potential suppliers. Just start going through the list and just start contacting people. I mean, it's almost ridiculously easy of how easy it is to find random leads. Doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to be good. Worst case scenario is you start getting on the phone, you flub up, you screw up a few times, maybe you send the wrong email a couple times. But the reality is if you don't get started, you'll never get through those growing pains. And at some point, you'll get a yes. At some point, someone will say, you know what, we do want to hook up with you. At some point, someone will say, yeah, I've got this leftover product I need to get rid of. Can you take care of that? And you're like, wow, I already do that with arbitrage. Awesome. I'd love to do that for you. That's really the most advice I have, is just to get started on it and start somewhere. Even if you just go onto the site that I have, just go through the free materials. There's a ton of information on there, but the reality is that all it really takes is just to start getting going. That's it.
Do you recommend people jump all in and just, I'm leaving arbitrage and I'm going to jump full into wholesale, or do you recommend people start very slowly?
No. Going cold turkey is extremely tough. It is very, very tough. I've heard of people doing it and doing it well, but it is tough because you need to have a decent amount of cash flow, especially if you're. Here's another caveat to this: is if you're relying on income from your Amazon business, then do not go cold turkey unless you have such a stockpile of cash that you could potentially take a shortage for multiple months, then be able to support yourself. Then maybe it's okay. And if you're not necessarily supporting yourself on your Amazon business, then you can probably take the hit because you're probably not taking any money out anyways. So that would kind of be my advice: is if you're in a situation where you either depend on the income or you just can't fathom your revenue just disappearing for a while, then do not go cold turkey. Maybe take 5 to 10 hours a week and say, all right, this is my wholesale time. 5 to 10 hours a week, I'm going to start in wholesale. I'm going to start doing these things, start making some calls, and just kind of build up slowly like that. That way you can kind of maintain what you have going on with arbitrage. You keep building it up and you keep your revenue train going so you can still bring in that income and build that cash flow. And then kind of your wholesale kind of starts ramping up. And then hopefully at some point you can make a decision and say, okay, well, I'm either going to outsource my arbitrage and have someone else do that. And so that way I can spend all of my time on wholesale. Or you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I don't even want to bother with arbitrage anymore because that's just a pain in the ass. So I'm going to start, doing all wholesale. And so it's a matter of figuring out where that line is, where you can make that change.
Okay, cool. I'm sure you have a lot more advice for us at the Great North Ecom Conference in about a
Oh, you have
week's
a
time.
conference next week. I
Yeah.
totally forgot about that. Wow, man, just blew my mind.
But I want to thank you for your time, Chris.
Not a problem, sir. It's been fun.
Yeah, I could sit here and talk to you all day.
Hey, I told you that's what I like doing too. So, do we miss any actual questions in the audience? I know there's a little thing for Q&A here. Did I miss anything? I don't think so.
We had a couple.
Okay.
Do you want to answer them, or
I think I actually got most of the questions that were in there. I got
what
one
we
here
could
that
do
says,
is have people post it on the Facebook Live, and then you can go in there and answer that in your own time.
yeah, that's fine. There's one in here I think I did miss, which said, do you recommend incorporating before even thinking of doing wholesale? You will likely want to have a resale license before you start doing wholesale because they will likely ask you for that in most cases. So I would recommend at least having an entity in place so you can get a resale license. Now, your question is incorporating, which I'm assuming you, I don't know if that's Canadian for having some sort of entity.
Yeah.
I know in the United States, incorporating means running a corporation where we have LLCs and other things. So there's probably a little bit of a language barrier there, or difference.
I
But,
just want to
yeah.
say something about we don't have resale licenses here in Canada,
Okay,
but a GSD/HST number will serve the same purpose.
there you go. So I know like here in the States, usually I'd recommend having some sort of entity where it's a sole proprietor or LLC or partnership or an S corp or a C corp. Recommend having something up front so we can get your resale license and get your bank business accounts and things like that. Because the reality is that when you're starting a business in general, you don't necessarily want to commingle all your personal and business assets into one. That's one of the first things that people recommend doing when you're starting a business is to not do that, but a lot of people still do it. So I usually recommend starting fresh, getting yourself some sort of entity, getting yourself your own bank account, throwing some money in the bank account so that way you can actually like keep it totally separate from your personal. So when it comes around tax time, you're not trying to sit there and figure out, oh, did I spend this on business or personal? I sourced some stuff at Walmart. Was that eggs or was it or was it that the item I sold last month? You know, so yeah. Anyways, I think that was the question we had earlier up there. So,
Okay.
Other than that, yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to put it in the Facebook live chat, and I'll hopefully answer them at some time next year. And I'm kidding, I'll answer at some point. But I definitely appreciate you having me, and it's been a
Thank
lot
you
of
so
fun.
much for your time.
Definitely see you guys next week.